So, hello everyone. I am Mercelia Anastasiadou, a lecturer in diplomacy and international relations at Neapolis University Pafos. This afternoon, I will have the pleasure of hosting you to this event on behalf of the Department of History, Politics, and International Studies at Neapolis University Pafos. So thank you for joining us this Thursday afternoon, 17th of February 2022. I am delighted to welcome you all to this webinar on aspects of security and extend a warm welcome to our speaker and a great colleague of mine, Dr. Maria Alvanou. This is a webinar titled Lone Actors, Challenges for Homeland Security. The presentation will explain the debate and difficulties around the concept of lone actors, focusing on practical aspects in the framework of criminal justice. I am going to introduce our speaker very briefly. Our guest lecturer today is Dr. Maria Alvanou. Maria is a criminologist actively engaged in the field of terrorism studies, counterterrorism, and countering violent extremism. She has dealt with lone actors in her research and as a member of the Radicalization Awareness Network, contributing to the relevant Spotlight Lone Actor publication. She is a member of its Time research team for security, terrorist issues, and managing emergencies of the Catholic University of Milan and the Radicalization Awareness Network expert pool. Currently, she is also participating in the EU MENA Information Sharing and Analysis Network Counterterrorism Information Exchange and Criminal Justice Responses project by CEPOL, the European Union Agency for Law Enforcement Training. She's a practicing Supreme Court defense lawyer in Greece and a mediator recognized by the Greek Ministry of Justice. In the University of Neapolis Pafos, she carries out the Homeland Security online postgraduate module. So Maria will provide you with an overview of more or less 20 minutes, and then we will have a Q&A session. I will be timekeeping to make sure to leave plenty of time for discussion. The session is recorded, and we encourage you to post your comments, questions, or ideas to the Q&A function. And a last remark, a warm thanks to the marketing director of the Neapolis University, Mr. Sophocles Paraskou, and his dream team for paying particular attention to details for promotion of this event and for their support throughout the preparation of today's webinar. So, Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Anastasiadou, and thank you very much for the warm welcome and also for organizing this meeting and for having the idea to actually present this work also to the students of Neapolis University, but also to anyone who is interested on this subject. I will start by saying that this presentation is based on a publication that was carried out on behalf of RAND, the Radicalization Awareness Network. And it is focused on a phenomenon that it is of much interest for anyone who is dealing today with the phenomenon of terrorism and is looking to the different types of modus operandi that exist out there and pose challenges. And I would say that the focus is in the criminal justice aspect, the practitioners of the criminal justice field, because at least in the European context, the way that we counter terrorism has not been orientated to the military aspect that, for example, we have seen in the United States. We try also not to use even the phrase war on terrorism, we want to highlight the fact that we deal with terrorism as a crime and as I said before, in the context of the criminal justice system. So the point is, how do we deal with the lone actors and what difficulties exist when we try to approach the phenomenon, as I said before, from this point of view? But let's say also generally, let's start with what makes lone actors so interesting. Why do we deal so much with them? Well, if we have some of you in the audience who are a bit older than those who are today 20 or 30 years old, definitely I'm not in my 20s or 30s, so by all means, we belong in the same group. We remember a time when talking about terrorism meant talking about organizations and groups. So we were talking about Bader-Meinhof, we were talking about Brigate Rosse. If we are in Greece, we were talking about the 17th of November. Generally, the whole conversation about terrorism was orientated, as I said before, to the organization and group. And the people who carried out the attacks were a bit indifferent. I'm sure you remember, as I said before, names of organizations. Probably you remember some notable figures. So if we're talking about Bader-Meinhof, definitely you remember Andreas Bader, Ulrike Meinhof. They gave their name, after all, in the Rotterdam faction. But these were, I would say, exceptions. Generally, the people who carried out the attacks and their background remained a bit indifferent. We were interested in the dynamics of the organization, the dynamic of the group, and how it was related to the goal of the group. But today, with the lone actors, there is this shift from focusing on the organization to focusing to the individual perpetrator that carries out the attack, and he is the person that matters, and he or she, although she, if we're talking about female perpetrators in the lone actor phenomenon, we're talking about an exceptional, I would say, number. I would even say that with certain definitions, we could even say non-existent. But in any case, we're talking about a male phenomenon, and we are focusing on the personality, the characteristics, the whole path leading to radicalization, to violence that an individual has. And of course, we are also talking about the special capabilities that this individual person has. And because of these capabilities, his career in terrorism, his career in violence can be successful. And I think that for us who belong in the criminology field, more than I think for those who examine terrorism from a different point of view, for example, from history, from the field of history, from the field of international relations, they still, I think, look much on the phenomenon of terrorism, again, from the organization point of view. But for us in criminology, lone actors are very interesting because they touch upon the very core of our field, which is the question, why do certain people carry out crimes? So in this case, why do certain people carry out terror attacks, and they carry them out in a way that it is much disconnected from a wider, let's say, context of the organization? Another reason why lone actors are so interesting is because definitely they can create more fear and they gather the attention of media. Now, why is this? Because when you have an organization, pretty much based on the history of the organization, the goal of the organization, the way that the organization has appeared in the criminal scene, you can predict a bit the way that the organization behaves. But when you have lone actors, you have people who take on their own, they take the initiative to hit. So this makes them more dangerous. You don't know when a hit will take place, how it will take place, where it will take place, and there is this flexibility that exists from the modus operandi side. when we're talking about a lone actor, that yes, indeed, it can instill more fear. I remember, for example, when I was in Israel during the Second Intifada, and I was also in Israel carrying out part of my postdoc during the Third Intifada. And in the Third Intifada, with the knives attacks, let's say also that this has been a modus operandi that definitely lone actors have used in Europe. What was evident was that there was more fear in the Israeli society. Why? Because this type of hitting, as I said before, was less predictable. So everyone was looking at the other, thinking, okay, could this person near me be a person that will strike with a knife, or a person that will take a car and start running against others? So as I said before, there is the issue of fear. And I think that empirically, we could also agree that it gathers the attention of media more. And even I would say it has been abused by the media, in the sense that every time there has been one perpetrator, the media they seem not to be looking whether there is affiliation with an organization or not. Almost automatically, they use the label lone wolf. Actually, they don't use the phrase lone actor. Lone wolf sounds a bit more fascinating. So this is the term that they use. I would say that this is an abuse that doesn't help us as researchers, because in order, we will speak about definitional issues a bit later, but I will say also at this point that in order to fight the phenomenon, you have to understand the phenomenon, and you have to map it exactly as it appears. So when media speak about lone wolves, just because they see one perpetrator during an attack, they're not helping us. And they don't understand that it could be the case, and this has been the case in the past, for example, when we were talking about organizations using perpetrators that were recruited and parts, they were real members, regular members of the organization. But for operational reasons, it could be the case that the hit could be carried out in the best way when only one person would carry it out. So I think that this distinction is a distinction, and is a distinction that doesn't appear to matter for the media. So this is a problem for us. Now, gathering the attention of the media and creating more fear also connects to the fact that when we're talking about lone actors, usually we're talking about an ideological umbrella that covers them. And this can be an organization or a network that gives the inspiration. So it's not an organization or a network that is functionally, logistically connected with the perpetrator, but still it is the one that is calling the ideological shots. It's giving, as I said before, the inspiration for the whole hit. And of course, this creates more danger. But I would say that also, if we are talking from the side of evaluating the organization or the network that provides this ideological umbrella, we could say that at that moment, the status of that organization or network elevates. Its reputation becomes more important. Why? Because it is shown to the public that this organization, this network, is able to radicalize, is able to recruit, is able to generally organize right. Now, just think why we talk so much in Europe about Daesh. Why actually we talk all over the world so much about Daesh? And why we talk about Daesh even more than we did about Al-Qaeda, the organization that, in a sense, started this fame of the Islamist terror network. Why? Because Daesh managed to become a brand name of such an ideological umbrella. So every time we had a lone actor / lone wolf, an individual carrying out an attack, and we heard in the media an attack took place in such a modus operandi, almost automatically, the question was already behind in our head. Is it Daesh? It must be Daesh. And even though in some cases, I would say, evidence was not conclusive whether Daesh was in a way the inspiration, it doesn't matter. Daesh went and took credit. And from that moment on, Daesh created its image, its terror brand name, and it became the fear for security that we know it became. I mentioned already, as part of creating fear, that the element of surprise that lone actors can create, it can be anyone. The hit can take place anywhere and anytime. Anyone can become this lone wolf. Exactly is part of the element of surprise that we're interested in. Last but not least, in the interesting part of researching lone actors is that it has shown how much we stereotype terror operations and how much we stereotype also terror actors. We have connected lone wolves so much. I mean, if you see, especially in the first years, the literature that was produced, we have connected the phenomenon with Islamist terrorism. We have connected it with the fear caused by Al-Qaeda and especially Daesh. However, the truth is that actually, for example, the far-right C has used and has to show lone wolf actors, lone actors. So I think that part of the interest that one can have in this phenomenon is exactly about the way we have seen and we have interpreted terrorism and extremism. There are so many levels indeed that for someone who deals with terrorism, lone actors can be interesting. Now let's see some definitional issues. And scholars still argue, debate, fight about what are we talking about when we're talking about lone actors. And I was giving a lecture a couple of weeks ago for an American university. And again, this difference in seeing the phenomenon and defining it was quite obvious. There are some, the point is, lack of connection / affiliation relationship with the organization, with an organization. But this lack is not absolute, because what we see in definitions is that there are various grades of this lack, absence of relationship and affiliation between the perpetrator and an organization functioning as an ideological umbrella that is accepted by scholars. So inside literature, we have many ways. In the United States, I would say that the leading opinion is that when we're talking about a lone actor, we should be talking about a person that has absolutely no affiliation and relationship with an organization. So no logistic support at all, no chatting and communication, preparing and organizing the attack. Someone who is detached, who, yes, works, as I said before, under the inspiration that has been created by groups, but that's it. And also, we will talk about a case of self-radicalization. However, in other scholars, we see that they accept also, let's say, a small degree of communication, of preparation, of radicalization, of advice and logistic support, even if that means downloading certain manuals that help and prepare modus operandi. And also the definitional issues become very important when we have cases where there has been also some physical contact and belonging to smaller cells. And the question is whether, again, this relationship and affiliation touches wholly or in part, having any relationship through communication with the organization that could be directing the attack or training the attacker. Now, my personal position where I put myself, I definitely agree with the US opinion. So for me, from the moment that I discover a connection, especially if we're talking about a physical connection, even if we're talking about a small cell, even if we're talking about, I will throw in the same thing that I criticized before. I will use the Islamist scene here as an example, but I think it's an example that we can understand better. This is why I will do it. So if we have the example of someone being in contact with an imam that radicalizes and uses speech that incorporates hate and prepares terrorism, preparing this radicalization process, in that case, I will definitely not consider this person as a lone actor. So, as I said before, these are the definitional issues that exist. There is this argument, there is this debate, and those issues exactly show to us, if you want, the multifaceted aspect that exists for this phenomenon. I mean, although I take the position I mentioned before, I can't disagree to the fact that, yeah, sometimes those who argue that we should be a bit more flexible and recognize that someone can be on his own initiative, but still have some help. Okay, it can have some truth in it. I think it's something that we discussed. I mentioned it before, but that we're talking about a phenomenon that goes way beyond the Islamist terrorism phenomenon, in the sense that it's not an Islamist exclusivity. For years now, there are and there have been scholars who speak about the extreme right-wing space in terrorism scene has been that generally the right-wing terror scene was not recognized as such. So those who were individuals carrying out such hits would not be named as terrorists, and they would be seen more like people who were carrying out attacks for personal reasons. It was, I believe, the New Zealand attack that changed this a lot, and we started to talk indeed about nationalist / right-wing individuals who operate as lone wolves in the context of terrorism. The important thing is that we should be ready to recognize this operational phenomenon without prejudice to a specific type, ideology, if you want, of extremist / terrorist violence. Why? Because, as I said before, you want to fight a phenomenon, you better map it well, and you better recognize it in all its dimensions. One side that I believe is interesting, and I get this example again from the United States and the Oxford shootings that have been dealt by the criminal justice system in that state as terrorism. So terror attacks were used as a charge against the young person who carried out the shooting. So one thing that I think it is quite interesting is whether we can actually deal with active shooting incidents in the same way like lone actors, lone wolves in terrorism, or whatever we can share and learn from the way that law enforcement deals with active shooting incidents, and what can we do to get this knowledge and actually adopt it and apply it in the field of lone actors in terrorism. The first challenge now, let's go to the criminal justice system. I think I made a quite a big introduction, so you got some of the issues that interest us generally from a scholar point of view. Let's start with mental health issues here, and what are the challenges that we see? In recent literature, mental illness starts to be very much connected with the subject of lone actors. But this is an issue that definitely can influence culpability and what takes place in trial. A case that definitely I highlight is the one of Anders Breivik in Norway. He was first diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, thus legally insane, but this had a tremendous impact in Norwegian society, And this led to the court to have a second diagnostic session where actually Breivik was decided as legally saying that he could actually stand for trial. Now, I'm not going to take a position here. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not going to badmouth the court, but definitely here we see an issue. We see an issue that says that, first of all, yeah, if you have a person with mental health issues, your trial goes up in the air. And if actually you follow this Norwegian model, always there will be a question. And again, respecting fully the committee, the second committee that decided that Breivik is capable of standing in trial, but still the question remains. Is this a diagnosis that actually just helps the trial? Which one of the diagnoses was wrong, the first one or the second? Traditionally in terrorism, especially when we were orientated towards the organization as the focus, there was the link between psychopathology and terrorism was rejected, mainly because it goes without saying, when we're talking about organizations in terrorism, in organized crime, we always say as criminologists that, you know, take the model of a normal organization. What people would it work with? So organizations strategically would reject individuals with problems that would create a situation that they would be unable to operationally trust them. On the contrary, there is some work that indeed highlights mental health issues to lone actors. So we have contradicting research here. Now, problems that arise. I mean, the first thing that I said concerns the trial, concerns those who are lawyers, judges, prosecutors, and I believe that if we have such audience amongst us, they understand the problem. As a lawyer, my biggest fear, if I would be from the prosecution side, would be for the defendant not to be able to stand for trial. If I was a defense lawyer, it would be my big party day if actually the court would decide that my guy can have no culpability. But there are also other challenges. First of all, the trap of connecting violence with mental health issues and vice versa, creating a discriminatory situation, marginalizing people who suffer from mental health issue, and in an easy way connecting them with the probability of radicalization to violence. And we do know that societies tend to stereotype, so this is a fear that we should very well keep in our mind. The second is that we have to be able to understand that there must be a range of practitioners who should keep their minds on trying to see indexes of such issues from the very first stage of arresting and investigating a suspect, to prosecutors, of course, pressing charges, lawyers preparing their defense strategies, and of course, the judges assessing competence to stand in trial and admission of evidence. I will just mention that in the Anglo-Saxon, in the UK law, for example, there is a problem with the investigation if a person belonging to vulnerable groups, like belonging to the group of people having mental health issues, if the investigation is carried out and evidence has been collected without this being noted and taken into account. So the evidence you may have prepared and you feel like your court case is strong could actually go up again, thin in the air. So problems when it comes to investigation procedures, admissibility of evidence, and of course, the outcome of trial. Why do we need also to be very much careful about this mental health issue and, if possible, to really, if it exists, identify? Because it can also reveal to us how certain vulnerabilities may have made brainwashing and indoctrination easier. So this is something that indeed needs some thought. And of course, when we are implementing disengagement projects. Now, the new fashion, especially in Europe, is exit, disengagement projects that help people either when they are in prison or even in earlier stages to get out of the terrorism scene. Well, these programs have to be tailor-made. And the issue is here that if you have mental health issues, interperson, you have to know that this exists and take them into account, or else your disengagement project will not work. Let me change slide. Before I change slide, I would like to say also something more here, that one of the problems that exists also with a mental health issue and lone actors is the fact that the word mental health issue is very vague. So what exactly are we talking about? Because in some studies under mental health issues, you will find psychological problems that you can definitely encounter quite easily and often to a large part of the population. And you can find also mental health issues so grave like schizophrenia. But the gap is vast. And the issue of culpability, as you understand, starts from, it can be 100% even if you have certain psychological problems, to 0 if you're suffering in a grave level from a certain illness, mental health illness. So you understand that there is this difficulty too. Plus, from the moment we are having this discussion, linking mental health issues to lone actors in the phenomenon of terrorism, we're putting aside all the theories and, if you want, all the studies that have taken place, plus all the measures that exist, dealing with terrorism is a phenomenon that has also social roots and reasons. Because if it is a mental health issue, then there is little that you can do. Someone has the microphone open, so if she or he could shut the microphone, it would be great. Digital and financial trails. Okay, internet and digital environments can notoriously ease the pathway for radicalization to violence, particularly for lone actors. They're in the computer and they have a very fertile ground to self-radicalize. There is social media, there are digital platforms out there with content to definitely facilitate self-radicalization. Now, one of the issues here is also COVID-19 and the situation of people indeed staying too much in front of the computer and how possibilities for self-radicalization raise. Generally, this could lead us into policies to see about digital platforms, video sharing services, trying to remove terrorist content, trying to disable access to it, and also to monitor participation in various discussions online and give to authorities valuable information when we're talking about lone actors. Why? Because when we had an organization existing and planning an attack, the trails left for authorities were more. The possibilities for the authorities to indeed understand the plot and intervene and thwart it were more. But here you have a person who actually is alone, deciding alone, not talking to anyone about his or her plans. So maybe the only trails that you do have could be some digital trails about a person visiting certain sites, certain platforms. Is it easy to get and assess as law enforcement such evidence? Yes, it's very difficult, because just because someone is entering such platforms doesn't mean that he or she will prepare an attack. But definitely, we can have some valuable information in order to establish self-radicalization or any online instigation, incitement that could be essential to our trial. Okay? And this is the role also of police practitioners at this stage, to try and obtain admissible to trial digital evidence. Now, also the financial trail, the trail of money behind an attack. When we were talking about an organization, could be found there a lot more easier than when we're talking about a simple modus operandi. Someone is taking a knife from his home. He doesn't need to obtain any weaponry, no money spent, nothing. He can get this knife and start stabbing. So you understand that there is no substantial money trail to help the authorities track down and arrest the culprits before the attack. Oops. Just a moment. Last but not least, closing, because I think also the time is passing, some special consideration researching lone actors. I already mentioned COVID-19, and we need to monitor how COVID-19 situation, how the pandemic and the lockdowns have affected this phenomenon, especially in relation to young people, definitely more active online and on social media. But I think that as a criminologist, the thing that interests me the most, and I focus on gender generally, is why women seem to have such an extremely low representation in lone actor violence. What are the reasons behind this gender gap? When we were talking about organizations, we were talking about social stereotypes, yes, existing in the organizations still, even if we were talking about far left organizations, proposing a different view of society with equality of women still, we had seen that in organizations, there was a different, sometimes at least there was a different role of women. And generally, participating in a crime that has a more organized nature has been more difficult for women. They have to encounter still stereotyping. The glass ceiling doesn't exist only for lawful activity, it exists also for illegal activity. But here, when you have self-radicalization and when you have the capability, as I said before, to just take a knife and go out and act, why do we still have such a low representation of women in low actor violence? And I think with this interest of mine, I can actually close this small presentation. I gave you some issues and challenges regarding lone actors. And thank you very much, Dr. Anastasiadou. I think we can open the floor for questions. And thank you to the audience.
Thank you very much, Maria, for your very insightful speech. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Joseph Van Dijk. He raised his hand. So if you have a question, please tell us briefly the main point, Mr. Van Dijk. I think that maybe the hand is raised accidentally. Yeah. As I can see at the Q&A function, there are no questions from the...
I don't know if this is good or bad.
Okay, Dr. Leslie Wagner has a question. Please, Mrs. Wagner.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's so nice to be with you online. I'm calling from Detroit, Michigan. And I'm a psychologist, a member of the World Mental Health Coalition. My nephew attended school with the shooter in Oxford here, grade school. And, you know, it was sad to go through his yearbook and see what a sweet young man he was. Here in the United States, we are now criminally prosecuting the parents for not securing the gun, nor informing the school about mental health struggles that he had. And in some counties, they are looking at not locking up our guns properly here, a criminal offense, and that you could be held criminally liable. And I thought it's very complicated and interesting how responsible are parents for their lone acting child and their culpability when a gun is not secured. And as I'm sure many of you know, we are very strong in gun activism, and because of the proliferation of guns, we have more gun violence than in many places in the world. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Wagner, Leslie, can I call you Leslie? Because I know Leslie,
Of course.
actually, she was one of our hosts in a US Department Exchange IDLP program, a very esteemed, I would say, scholar. You raised a very important point that also is about access to the tools of lone actor, terrorism, extremism, violence. So this is a very good point. And I would say that personally, I'm looking forward to see how the trial will go on in Michigan, because the prosecution also mentioned, and I think that this is also important in this case, apart from the issue of the parents, that is, I think, crucial. This is the first time that terrorism charges are used. And the question is, does the argument of the prosecutor, well, we used the terrorism cases because such an attack created terror, can actually stand? Because if you don't have the political goal behind an attack and you call it terrorism just because it caused terror, as a criminologist, I can mention to you a range of crimes that indeed cause even more terror than terrorism to citizens, but still we don't prosecute them like terrorism. I would just mention, you have a serial rapist. I can assure you that the women in the community, the city where this serial rapist acts, will be scared, will feel fear, and will definitely even change their agenda and the way that they live in order to protect themselves. But no one would ever think about prosecuting a serial rapist with terrorism just because he creates terror. So I was very much surprised to see this argument. And the prosecution, in a case that, yes, we have a lone actor, but definitely until now, we would have categorized it as active shooting. We have this case now being dealt in the framework of terrorism and without any political aim of the act. The mental health issue, yes, it stands, as you said. The issue of good or bad parenting, yes, I agree, it's something that we should look into. Definitely access to weapons, although this American experience that you have is a bit different from what we have in Europe, because in Europe, the lone actor attacks we have either by vehicle or by knife brings us into a different situation where everyone has very easy access.
Right.
So thank you very much, Leslie. Dr. Wagner.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you. I will give the floor now for the second question to Lorraine Mirembe, if I pronounce it well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Lorraine Mirembe. Yeah, you tried the other names. So I have two main issues. I don't know whether I can be heard properly, but the first one is kind of like a contribution, just my point of view from the presentation. I think it was about what you talked about, the definitions of lone actors. And one was the diverging view that a person cannot be a lone actor if they have any kind of connection or assistance from the umbrella groups. But then when the previous speaker talked about the issue of access, it kind of drew my mind to the fact that for most people who intend to carry out these acts of terrorism, most of them, I don't want to call it high end, okay, most of the most extreme forms, like those who intend to carry out mass terror, like on a really high level, the person may be a lone actor, let me say, like they formed the intent as an individual and all, but they do not have access to the resources, or they are not able to execute the crime on their own. So it draws them to kind of have that connection with the the groups, the known groups, to help them execute their motives. So I think in line with that, it kind of rules out the fact that even if someone has some kind of association with the umbrella groups that are known, they could still be a lone actor. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to add. Then I also have a question. I would like some clarity, like how do you draw the line between maybe just an act of violence and then actual terrorism, also for these lone actors, like you said, maybe if there is a person in a community that is like a rapist or a serial killer, I don't know, like they're just doing something causing terror in the society, but then they can't be called a terrorist. So how do you draw the line between just maybe violence and causing terror amongst people and then actual terrorism?
Okay, for the first comment, as I said, there are diverse views. I would just say that one thing that troubles me with a definition that connects, that doesn't take into account that there should be no connection is, for example, if we see the London Bridge attack, and all of a sudden the media were talking about lone actors, but it comes out afterwards that, yeah, there was a small cell, yeah, there was some logistic support. Well, Al-Muhajirun was there. So if you have a person that is a lone actor, it means that this person should act on his own. Now, in the example that you gave, if I don't have the facility to do something, let's think again, like in the normal work and in a normal company. If I can't do some work on my own, and I have to go into a company to give me everything and act on its name, then even if I was a freelance, at that point, I'm acting as part of the organization. So I believe that the same stands also in the illegal field. If I don't have the power, if I don't have the logistics, if I don't have anything, and I'm going into the group, and actually in the name of the group, with the whole facilitation of the group, I'm carrying out an attack, I doubt whether the lone actor side is that strong. But as I said before, there is a range of scholar views here, and I'm not discrediting anyone, but definitely I'm taking my own position. Now, in your second question, very good question, and I think that it's the core when we're talking about anything that has to do with terrorism, is defining what terrorism is. I'm not one of those who still believe in the saying during the 70s, one man's terrorism is another man, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Why? Because definitely now we have, at least in Europe, a uniform legislation that very well defines what a terror act is. And I would even push a bit the agenda further and say that this EU member states definition is very much alike the definition that was given decades ago by the UN in the UN Convention on Terrorism. So definitely we can map terrorism. Now, yeah, political agenda still exists. Our guys, when we discuss, the guys we like are never terrorists, they're just guerrilla fighters. The guys we don't like, yeah, they're terrorists. But if we're talking from a scholar point of view and the legal point of view, the article is there. And you will see that, for example, if we're talking about EU member states, you have not just the creation of fear, but you have the political goal that is translating into applying pressure to a government or an international organization to change policy. So I don't see that with a young boy that is taking a gun, going to a school and start shooting. Do I see a tragedy? Of course. Do I see mental health issues? If experts say so, by all means. I'm a criminologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. But do I see terrorism? Well, at least with the definitions we know until now, no. And even in the 70s, the whole discussion was whether the goal was good or not. Let's face it. If we supported the goal, yeah, it was not a terrorist. If we didn't support the goal, it was a terrorist. But no one ever doubted the fact that there should be a political goal. So I think that the threshold, if I understand your question well, is yes, that there should be this political goal behind the activity that is translated, as we see in legislation, as trying to apply pressure to government or international organizations. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you have. Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you. Thank you. If there is no other question, I would like to ask Maria whether, I mean, just give us your opinion, whether the internet and digital environments enhance the capabilities of lone actors, and if yes, in which ways?
Definitely, internet has been a key game changer. Why? Because you have in your computer, in your smartphone, the ability to download modus operandi of other successful attacks, to get any information about how you could actually carry out an attack. But not only this, you come into contact with ideologies that radicalize. You come in contact with images that can radicalize you. You have no frontiers. You have not the problem. I mean, in the past, it was the organization that was trying to do the recruitment, was trying to come into contact with you, and there were obstacles. You had to print a manifesto, you had to distribute it, and of course, you could not do that in the open. You had to go to places where, I mean, it's usually the youth that gets radicalized, and you had to do this preparation to prepare and create a pool of sympathizers and recruits. But now you have a person that surfing in internet starts to shape an idea about things, and from that moment he can have access into material that will radicalize him or her to hate and to terror. And this is also my objection, or if you want, my question about women. Women have exactly the same capacity today to be with a smartphone, to be on a computer and self-radicalize. So why do we have less number of lone actors who are women, when this procedure of self-radicalization, this negative gift of internet in that sense, is the same also for women?
Thank you. I don't know if someone from the audience would like to make a comment or has a question. Dr. Leslie Wagner. Yes.
If I may again address you, Maria, I wonder, there is talk of the attack on our Capitol on January 6th here in the US, talking about that as domestic terrorism, and that primarily now it is the individuals who are being prosecuted. There is the larger trial of going on, I shouldn't say trial, the investigation. But I wonder if you could comment on that, the individuals versus the group that I guess radicalized or helped coordinate or encourage the attack. Thank you.
Well, the Capitol attack, I will call it an attack, is one that interests us a lot for many reasons. One of those is the lone actor side, but this also lone actor side connected with what we were talking before, the power of social media and radicalization online. And I think that basically one of the talks that is a very serious talk is, what about this material that existed there online? What about the influence that political figures could have had expressing themselves online at that point of time? I'm not mentioning names, I'm not saying anything.
I know.
Some things are yeah. Okay, so there is this talk. Now, I'm not that sure that, I mean, I'm also following how the investigation goes. I want to make sure that there is no actual level of networking that could have shown more relationship towards even small cells. I'm not that sure still, because from what I hear, there seem to be people who actually belong to some groups in the past. They have had a background of, as I said before, belonging to some problematic groups, already affiliated with some problematic, if I can use this adjective, ideologies. So I want to see whether we're just talking about inspiration or indeed membership. But I think that the most important thing when we're talking about the capital events is the role of social media.
Thank you.
Maria, since I've just noticed that we only have like a couple of minutes, I was wondering, you mentioned at the beginning about a paper that has been published. So I was wondering whether you could provide us very briefly the content of that paper and where we could find it.
Well, it is the last issue of the Spotlight, which is a publication by the Radicalization Awareness Network. You will see different aspects of the lone actor activity and comments from a variety of scholars. As I said before, everyone from his own scholar point of view sees the phenomenon from a different way. So my contribution was the criminal justice, let's say, challenges for practitioners who are in the first line, dealing with this aspect, but you will see also more in-depth analysis for, let's say, other fields and other aspects. In my first slide, the web address was there, but anyone who can actually Google, run Spotlight, run Lone Actor, the publication is there for anyone who is interested. And I think that it was a very good attempt to try and highlight, try and underline certain points. Now, this is a phenomenon that is definitely dynamic. We cannot say that, okay, I have concluded the research and those are the conclusions, this is the summary, and that's it. Because whenever we have human behavior, we have things that will always surprise us and things that will change because the instances, the circumstances, the conditions change. For me, today, one of the big questions is not only just the gender issue that I said, but also whether, when we're talking about lone actors, are we talking about the radicalization path that is so much influenced by personal issues? The mental health would be, let's say, the one that mostly is underlined, or do we still speak about the phenomenon that inside the context of terrorism is being influenced by social issues, by grievances? Can we talk about conflict in society that influences this phenomenon of lone actors? Because that's why we all focus on the mental health and we spend so much talking about it. If we connect lone actors with health issues, then all the social theories go out from the window.
Last question from Lorin Mirebe. Dr. Maria, in regards to the research about lone actors, do you take research assistance from individuals in case someone would like to participate? Yeah.
I'm a lone worker. So I would say that if I have students who would be interested in dealing with this phenomenon, I would be very glad to give, let's say, questions in my lesson and help them research this phenomenon and help them even write an article and publish it. But when I'm researching, I like to research in a more lowly way. Like the lone actors, I like to act alone in research.
Okay, so it is 8 o'clock. So Maria, if you would like to state some last remarks, and then to end this very nice and informative session, and promise to our audience that more webinars will follow in the next few months. So,
well, I would like to start by thanking you, Dr. Anastasiadou, for all your support and help, and promote a bit our course, Homeland Security. I believe that the University of Neapolis is very progressive and very on the spot today, having such a course. It's not a terrorism course, it's a Homeland Security course. So we are actually dealing with a variety of threats that concern security. A big part of them, of course, is terrorism, but we deal with a variety of phenomena. And I believe that our students have the possibility of interaction and of not just studying literature, but being able, they get the tools in order to interpret phenomena. And if tomorrow they are in a position of responsibility, to be able to really have an opinion about what is going on and design answers, design measures against the threats. So I believe that we have a very good model, and I would like to welcome as many students as possible to our course. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for your presentation, and the audience for being here with us today. This webinar is recorded and it will be uploaded to the channel of the university. So anyone could watch the video in an asynchronous manner. And thanks again, Maria, for all your support and for providing us with updated information about your areas of expertise. And I wish you to have a very good night. So thank you very much.
Bye-bye to all.
Bye.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.